And along with lighting our chalice as a symbol of our faith, we will be lighting this beautiful menorah. And I'd like to thank Pastor Brenda for gifting us with this beautiful menorah. And she's going to be lighting our chalice. And I also invite up Russ Braun, who has offered to light our menorah this morning.
In memory of them we sing, their songs within us, gathering all their dreams we carry in our bones. Their songs will lead us on, their dreams shape us, and their light will guide us home. We kindle our chalice this day in remembrance of all who have given their lives for freedom, for larger life, for justice. We light on the altar of our hearts a flame of memory and hope to hearten our struggle and guide our weary steps in the path of peace.
In Fiddler on the Roof, Tevye says that Jews have a blessing for everything, even for the Tsar. The first night of Hanukkah, there are actually 3 blessings that are said. The first one talks about the sacred obligation that Jews have to light the lights of Hanukkah. The second talks about the miracles that were performed for our ancestors and about the miracles that are performed in our day today. And then the third blessing is about thanking God for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for allowing us to celebrate this festival season. So here we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Hannukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavoteinu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
Thank you. Our opening words are by Krista Taves. Whether you have come here with heart full or heart empty, with spirits high or low, rested or tired, hopeful or despairing, whether you have come here out of habit, conviction, loneliness, or curiosity, you belong here because you are here. And all that you have and all that you are is welcome here. This morning we are together the heartbeat of this congregation. As part of our worship life, spirit of life, that which tethers us to each other, makes us feel connected to one another here and to our larger world and to our earth. That which calls us to look beyond ourselves, to widen our circle of concern beyond our families and our friends. That which holds us to a higher standard and calls us to care for others, to speak softly, and to listen. That which stirs in us a sense of discomfort, of outrage, of hope. That which teaches us that peace begins within and spreads like ripples through relationships and communities and nations. Spirit of all this, we lift our prayer to you this morning for peace. Peace in our hearts, peace in our families, peace in this community, peace in this nation, peace in this world. We cry out for respectful conversation. We cry out for reason and justice. We cry out for an end to violence and hatred. We cry out for mercy and understanding. We cry out for resources for the poor. We cry out for religious freedom. We cry out for bipartisan dialogue. We cry out for compromise that is fair. We cry out for ceasefires and negotiations. We cry out for wisdom and mediation. We cry out for solidarity, not charity. We cry out for the empowerment of women. We cry out for radical hospitality. We cry out for children and elders and teens and convicts and survivors and soldiers and women and men and Democrats and Republicans and Israel and Palestine and Syria and Egypt. Peace. This is our hope. Peace. This is our dream. Peace. This is our prayer. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Reverend Kathleen McTeague, entitled Hanukkah. Imagine yourself in the midst of the ancient story, she says. You and your friends, the survivors of war and persecution, have finally come home from a hard-won victory, but it doesn't feel like home. It has been shifted, cracked, and broken by war, and it's shadowed by the ghosts of those who have died. You all teeter on the edge of despair when you see the temple, the Holy of Holies, filthy and abused. Your arms ache at even the thought of what it takes to reclaim this space. In any case, what's the use? The sacred oil is almost gone, so the consecrating lamp cannot be lit. Then, in the midst of the exhausted, grieving silence, someone speaks. You hear the voice, small but firm, saying the only words that will let you gather yourselves to go on. Light the lamp. Though the oil has run out, light the lamp anyway, and we'll do what we can. On the wall next to my meditation altar, she says, there is a photo taken in the wake of the horrifying tsunami that struck Sri Lanka in 2004. The photo shows the ruins of a town flattened by the waters, nothing left but rubble. And there, in the midst of that devastation, a damaged statue of the Buddha has been set upright. its carved face chipped, but still beautiful, still serene. It sits there like a beacon, sending out the silent message, life is still here. Begin again. In Haiti, on the night after the catastrophic earthquake that took so many lives and leveled a city, in the utter darkness of a place in which there was no electricity, thousands of survivors in Port-au-Prince gathered at the shells of their churches. They stood in the night, and all around their shattered spiritual homes lifted their voices and sang. They poured out sacred songs of praise, of lamentation, and of hope. What were they doing? The people of Sri Lanka who set the statue amidst the rubble, the people of Haiti who lifted their voices against the earthquake, they were lighting the lamps, even though they knew that their oil had run out. Isn't it so humbling when children know more than we do? This happened to my brother-in-law early on in his fatherhood. He is a smart guy, but my niece and nephew are, and I am not being biased at all here, extremely brilliant. Scott, my brother-in-law, remembers being in a doctor's office with my nephew John when he was just 5 years old. Now, up until that point, Scott and my sister Sarah, with a little help from family and the local public library, could pretty much take credit for everything their children had learned. But that year, John had entered kindergarten, a land of wonder and learning that Scott could not follow him to. And so John was learning all kinds of things on his own and with his classmates and teachers. So back to the doctor's office. Scott and John were in the waiting room reading a children's magazine, Highlights or whatever they have in pediatricians' offices nowadays. And as it was the holiday season, there were pictures of all kinds of holiday symbols in the magazine. John was pointing them out to his dad. He pointed to a Christmas tree and a stocking and Santa Claus. He saw a Star of David and said, "Star." Then he pointed to a menorah and said, "Look, Daddy, a shamash." "No," said Scott in his fatherly wisdom, "Son, that's a menorah." It was not until they got home later that day and were reading some books from the library that Scott had his humbling moment. One of the books they had checked out was also about holiday traditions, and there on page 3 were these words: "In honor of Hanukkah, Jewish people all over the world light the candles of the menorah to celebrate 8 nights of light. The 9th candle at the center of the menorah is called the shamash." And so we learn from our children. And we also learn from the ancient stories passed down to us through the myths and legends and teachings of the world's religions. At this time of year, we are awash with the lessons of this season, lessons of generosity and hope, lessons of patience and wonder. To me, the story of Hanukkah teaches us 2 important things. Okay, there are probably more than 2, but for today, 2. First, we can bring light to the darkness. And second, our reserves are deeper than we think they are. Both lessons relate back to that story of lighting the lamp in the temple. And because this is the season of retelling the stories that have made us who we are as a people, I will tell it again. It's about 200 BCE, and a change in leadership brings an end to religious freedom for the Jewish people. Antiochus, the king of Syria, orders his soldiers to seize the temple in Jerusalem and rededicate it to the worship of Zeus. He orders all Jews to worship Greek gods and declares that observance of Judaism is to be punishable by death. A small group of rebels hide in the mountains rather than comply, and other Jews wishing to fight against the Greeks join them. This group, known as the Maccabees, grows and begins to fight. It takes years, but eventually they succeed in retaking their land from the Greeks, and they return to the temple in Jerusalem. But the temple has been defiled. The Jewish troops are determined to purify the temple and to relight the eternal lamp which has always burned there. But the oil, too, has been defiled. They find just one clean barrel, enough for just one night of light. It will take 8 days to procure new oil for the holy lamp, but they light it anyway. They bring light to the darkness for that one night. Miraculously, the oil burns for 8 nights. This is one of the stories that we retell each year during this season of darkness. For Jews, it is about reclaiming an identity. And for all people, it is about finding a reserve of hope when the situation is hopeless. About lighting a candle at this darkest time of year as an act of faith that light will return. I talked with Melissa Nussbaum, one of the members of this congregation with a Jewish background, about Hanukkah. As I said during candles, she wishes she could be here this morning, but she is in Mexico. But she said this: first, let's get this out of the way. Hanukkah is not Jewish Christmas. Okay, everybody in this congregation knows that, she says, but a lot of the Christian world doesn't, and it is one of those little annoyances one deals with when traveling in Goyish circles. She says, I mean, it's not like anyone ever asks, oh, Christmas, is that the Christian Hanukkah? But then it could be. They have, after all, such an incredible common denominator. Not the presents, she says, though that is clearly the most important factor for kids. And where would we be on Black Friday and in our consumer-based economy without presents? No, she says, it is the story and promise of light in the moment of greatest darkness. No coincidence, nobody's birthday, just the turning of the earth around the sun, solstice. Hanukkah is about the power of that moment, as it is marked in all cultures with a rich story of human sacrifice, struggle, and survival that stands up to countless retelling and enough magic to capture hearts and imaginations. About the Maccabees, she says, my father believed more in the idea of the Maccabees than the Maccabees themselves. These renegade shepherds did not throw up their hands in despair. About the oil lasting 8 nights, she says, I have always suspected that it was the women who scraped drops of oil together, like my great-great-grandmother who taught the women of her shtetl to make brooms out of what they could gather. At Melissa's extremely unorthodox Hanukkah parties that she used to throw in her town in Mexico, a big sign would greet Jews and Catholics alike to the party. A great miracle happened there. In Hebrew, those are the words represented on the four sides of the dreidel, a special Hanukkah betting game that cleverly disguised the retelling of the great story when retelling was forbidden. A great miracle happened there. The Dalai Lama says, "What is the meaning of miracle? A miracle is something unexpected. A miracle is something you cannot understand." We look for miracles outside ourselves, he says. Then he points to his head and draws a circle. This skull, small space, but lots of mysterious things still there. Perhaps the miracle of Hanukkah was not the reserve of oil that kept the light burning, but the reserve of hope it required to light it in the first place. 15 years ago, Arthur Borman's doctors told him that he would never walk unassisted again. He is a 47-year-old disabled veteran who has given up hope. To get around, he relies on leg and arm braces and sometimes a wheelchair. He weighs 297 pounds. Once an extremely fit American soldier, Borman was injured as a paratrooper in the Gulf War. Too many jumps have taken their toll on his back and knees. When the doctors tell him he will never walk again, he accepts this as fact. Exercise seems impossible. Countless physical trainers turn him away. And so he stays home on the couch and gains more weight. Just when it seems that there is no hope at all, Borman meets Diamond Dallas Page, a former star of the pro wrestling circuit, who has become, of all things, a yoga instructor. But Page believes in Borman, and he's willing to work with him if Borman is willing to put the time in. He is. And so with leg braces, a bad back, and absolutely no balance, Borman begins to practice yoga. At first, he falls every time he attempts even the simplest pose. His falls are heart-wrenching, his 300-pound body crashing to the floor. But he gets up again and keeps getting up again. Slowly, he begins to lose some weight, and this keeps him going. He's starting to believe that this can happen. One day, he tries walking without the braces, and he falls down. But he gets back up again. Just because I can't do it today doesn't mean I'm not going to be able to do it someday, he says. Soon, Borman's balance increases, and he becomes more adept at some of the poses. He keeps losing the weight, and the pressure on his knees lessens. He goes down to one cane, and then he is walking. He's becoming more flexible every day, and soon he can stretch his leg into the air and hold on to his toe. He loses 100 pounds in 6 months. He loses 140 pounds in 10 months, and he begins to run. They were wrong, he says. It was possible. Never underestimate what you can accomplish when you believe in yourself. Never give up. And thank you, he says to his yoga instructor, for believing in me. First, we can bring light to the darkness. And second, our reserves are deeper than we think they are. We need look no further than our own hearts for miracles. No farther than our great-great-grandmothers gathering what they could to make a broom. No further than our menorah that we lit this morning to keep a memory alive, or the first hopeful light we will kindle in the darkness at our solstice ritual. No further than our own determination to keep going when things seem hopeless. I didn't share Kathleen McTeague's entire reading with you earlier. Here are the rest of her words. There will come a time for most of us when we've got to decide whether we'll light our lamps, even when we're sure there isn't enough oil to keep them burning. It doesn't take a literal earthquake or flood for our lives to be swept away. There are other, smaller catastrophes. The long weariness of unemployment, sickness, bereavement, depression, or the other private disasters that make us despair. In the face of these smaller floods and earthquakes, we come back to sacred space. We light a candle, take a breath, and reconnect with the flow of a life infinitely larger than our little beating hearts. A life we are a part of no matter what, that calls us back, lifts us up, and sustains us. Light the lamp, though the oil has run out. Light the lamp and we'll do what we can. This is our sacred task, to trust that what we have is enough, to believe that our reserves are deeper than we think they are, to light a candle in the darkness and let it burn for one night, for 8 nights, forever. Amen, and blessed be.